Okay, welcome to the last section of notes before your test on Monday. So today we're going to take a look at strikes. And strikes are actually going to be the direct result of the unions, which we took notes on yesterday. The unions were organized in order to try to help the workers. So they were going to try to get a shorter working day, better wages, better conditions, higher pay, and all these things were supposed to be done in order to help the workers. The problem with the unions were that they were not organized themselves. The unions were divided between semi-skilled workers, skilled workers, and factory workers, which are unskilled workers, also divided by gender between male and female, and then they were also divided by race between African Americans and minorities and everybody else. So the unions themselves, although they are meant to help the workers out, did not really have a lot of progress because of their divisions within themselves, and then they are fighting against big business and government. And again, the government here is going to believe at this time period in laissez-faire, hands off of business. So anything that is going to potentially stop the business cycle is going to be seen as a negative. So the next one is going to be all of the strikes that actually did occur that are going to solidify in a lot of people's minds the fact that unions are not going to be a positive. So business does not support the creation of unions, and again, workers are looking at fixing their conditions, their hours, and their wages. So our first strike is going to be the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. What's really important about this strike is the size of it. It is going to span all the way from Wheeling, West Virginia, through Pittsburgh, and then all the way to Chicago. It is stopping interstate commerce on a large scale on the East Coast. It is involving a ton of workers, and it is causing some economic issues. As a result of that, the strike eventually does start to become violent because the owners of the railroads tried to bring in replacement workers. The state militia is then going to be called in order to try to fire the workers that were striking, and that doesn't work. So the business owners of the railroad turn to the government. And the head of the government this time period is going to be President Rutherford B. Hayes, and he is going to send in federal troops to break the strike. This is an important part because this is going to be a repeating scenario where the president is going to send in either the militia or going to send in federal troops supporting business over support of the workers. We also are going to see for the first time that the unions come out as being a negative. Here's a group of people that were stopping interstate commerce. They were stopping others from making money, predominantly a lot of common people who were working in shops or being connected to the railroads. So it's not just the fact that they're hurting big business, they're also hurting the common man at the same time. Our second incident is the Haymarket riot in Chicago in 1886. This one is a little bit different because it was already a strike that was occurring, and during the strike and protest that was happening, the police were there to keep order. Somehow things got out of control and one of the police officers kills a striker. This then leads to a much larger protest that spreads, which is why they eventually are going to have a mass meeting in Haymarket Square in 1886. During this protest, everything's going okay for a while. There's about 1,500 people there, and then it starts to rain. When it rains, the vast majority of people leave because they don't want to stand there and get wet. So when the people start to leave, there is a much smaller group that's left, and this is when you actually have a bomb go off. And there is controversy over who actually set off the bomb because we do not know for sure. Some people are going to believe that the bomb was going to be set off by one of the union member leaders who were in control of the mass meeting, upset that a large number of people had left due to the weather. Some people believe that it was an actual striker themselves who set off the bomb, and others believe it could have potentially just been, a bystander who actually just set off the bomb. Regardless of this, several of the police officers are going to respond, and they're going to fire into the crowd. You do have some police officers being killed. You have some additional protesters being killed. The end result is that we need to have somebody actually pay for this event. So they are going to start to look at the leaders of the union. So the leaders of the union are going to be tried, and they're eventually going to be found guilty and then executed for the bombing. There is very, very little evidence that they actually were involved, but at this time period, so many people are looking for justice that the union leaders are the ones that organized this mass meeting, so they are going to be held responsible. Again, this is a negative for unions. That's going to be blamed by the Knights of Labor and also all unions because, again, you've got a stoppage of work, you've got people being killed. It's impacting a large number of people now, not just a small number, but not only workers, but also police officers. You're threatening the safety of communities. So, again, lots and lots of negatives. Next strike actually happened here in Pittsburgh, and we actually are going to watch a video of the strike, but this is a Homestead strike here. This is going to be against Carnegie Steel, and Carnegie Steel, again, has something that's a little bit different. They actually had one of the strongest unions involved in Carnegie Steel. The union actually had been able to negotiate a really, really good contract for their workers, and Carnegie realizes that he is starting to lose money, because as his competitors are dropping wages, he's locked into this contract. So the workers actually are now going to have to renegotiate. And now during this renegotiation, they're dealing with Henry Clay Frick. Frick is going to want to reduce, obviously, their wages, and he also wants to reduce their numbers. He's looking at replacing some actual human workers with machines, and that also is going to cause a lot of issues because people are going to have to be fired. The union refuses to accept the fact that they are going to replace human workers with machines and decide to go on strike. Now, this is again where you have something that is a little bit different than all of the other issues or all the other strikes before. Most times there's a strike, the workers leave the building. This time the workers refuse to leave. So the workers are not going to leave the building because they do not want replacement workers to be brought in. So Frick is looking at trying to lock the workers out of the factory. All right, so the idea behind this with the workers being locked out of the factory is really dealing with basic economics. When you take a look at the basic economics of it, Carnegie and Frick have money. They are millionaires. They don't need to work every day. The mass majority of workers make a couple dollars a day, maybe a couple dollars a week actually, and they need the money for rent, they need it for food, they need it for their kids. They cannot hold out for this strike very long. So the idea by Carnegie and Frick is by locking the workers out, they won't get paychecks, they'll be pressured by their families to return to work, and then they'll have to sign the new contract that is going to allow the replacement of human workers with machines, and also is going to at the same time lower their wages. So again, the workers are going to need their paychecks, which is why they're going to lock them out. The workers took over the town in the plant in response to being locked out. Frick and Carnegie are then going to hire Pinkerton National Detective Agency, and they're going to be hired to go in and break up the strike. So the goal here was that they were going to come by boat and take over the factory and then force all the workers out as they move through the factory. But that does not happen because they are met by some strikers and they never actually really are able to take over the factory. The strikers are going to end up fighting against the Pinkertons, and the result of that is going to be 7 people that are going to be killed. 7 Pinkertons are going to be killed. Several of them are going to be actually injured, and they're going to be sort of escorted out of the plant through the people of Pittsburgh who are throwing stones and sticks and yelling at them. People are throwing, everything at them. So it's not, again, a relatively good scene for strikers or for the union. The governor this time was going to be William Stone. He sends in the state militia, and again, you're going to see that government is going to bad business and not the workers. We do have another strange incident here. Alexander Berkman is going to go to Henry Clay Frick's office and actually try to assassinate him. He's actually going to be shot, and he survives the initial gunshot wound. Eventually, he is going to succumb to it a little bit later on, but they are going to have an attempt to shoot Henry Clay Frick. The corporation, again, is going to gradually regain control of the plant. New machines are going to be brought in. People actually are going to get longer working hours and lower wages. So the whole entire point of the strike is going to backfire. And as you can tell from the political cartoon, this strike has failed. And you see Uncle Sam there shouting out, "You have to go back to work." So again, it is being said over and over again in every single strike situation, the government will back business, not the workers. All right, so impact of strike basically is, again, companies and government are stronger than the unions. So the unions really lose a lot of power after the Homestead strike, and they, again, are going to be seen as a negative. Next strike is the Pullman Railroad Company strike, and this one is a little different because you're dealing with a company town, and we'd already talked about Pullman, Illinois. So the company is going to lay off about 3,000 workers because of the economic panic of 1893, and that is the panic that you are going to see Rockefeller give $60 million to the government to try to stop, but again, he's seen as a negative light for doing it. So wages are going to be cut by 25%, and then wages are going to be cut again to 50%. Obviously, Obviously, that's a lot of money that people are losing. They're upset about it. But what makes them really upset is the fact that they live in this company town. They have to buy everything with script. It has to go through the company store. They have to pay rent to the company, and the company has not reduced prices in the store, and they have not reduced their rent. So workers are going to threaten to leave if their wages are not increased or rent is decreased. You're going to have a negotiator, an arbitrator who is going to be Eugene Debs, and he's going to ask the company to try to make out a deal. The company refuses, so eventually the railroad union calls for a strike. The Pullman Company is going to have strike breakers brought in, which is, again, the norm. So when your workers leave, I just get replacement workers and everything's going to be great. In most cases, when the replacement workers come in, they do not become permanent workers. They are temporary workers. However, that doesn't happen with the Pullman Railroad strike. After the strike is over, one of the provisions of the strike is all strikers are going to be blacklisted from the railroad industry forever. So they cannot get another job in any kind of railroad. President again, this time is going to be Grover Cleveland. It's going to send in federal troops to break up the strike. Eugene Debs is arrested for trying to negotiate. You're going to have Pullman strikers again fired, and then they are going to be blacklisted. All right, last strike is a Patterson Silk strike, and this one actually is one of the strikes that was the most successful. This is going to be a group of women and some men who are then going to stop basically working in the silk industry. And there's nobody who knows how to do it, so they can't just hire replacement workers, so they are going to get a little bit of success. When you take a look at unions as a whole, again, most of them do ban women, most of them ban minorities as well, but again, you start to see that we are having a very gradual change with the relationship between government and the workers in regards to business. After this Patterson Silk strike, this one is starting to see that maybe we need to have concessions, maybe we need to do something to help out the workers in order for them to have better lives. Mary Harris George is going to be one of the women who's going to help workers as they are going to negotiate with big business. She's going to help the United Mine Workers, and she's going to help them during the great B&O, Baltimore and Ohio Railroad strike of 1877. She also is going to be a supporter of trying to get rid of child labor. And again, biggest reason why people want to get rid of child labor so the kids can go to school. And she's going to be a major influence in getting the child labor law actually passed. We also have Pauline Newman. She's going to be International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and she actually, again, wins a steamstitch strike. You've got Carrie and Hannah, and they are going to, again, demand this is dealing with the textile industry and making cloth. So basically, women were required to work on 1-2 looms at a time, and they were looking for a way to increase production. So one of the ways to do that is to cut your workforce, but require a worker to actually work on 4 looms instead of 2. This is going to lead to, again, that 5-month strike, shuts down all of the silkworms and the dye houses, so you cannot get silk anywhere. And again, what you take a look at, businesses are going to have to give in to the demands of the workers because there is not going to be anyone else who's going to be able to actually make the silk. What is unique about this last strike is the fact that you do have some overlap between men and women. So you have the men and the women's unions working together against business. Business owners do fear the power of the unions because the unions themselves could basically cut into their profits and could lead to them basically the workers taking over the companies. And for most Americans, that's way too close to socialism and communism. So they are going to start to refuse to recognize union representation. They're not allowed to have union meetings inside of your buildings. Union members, if you're found out to be a union member, a lot of times you are going to also be fired. So what companies did instead, they had yellow dog contracts, and these are going to be signed whenever you get hired, and it says that you swear that you are not going to join a union. All right, we are almost done with the notes, but I'm out of time on this recording, so I'm going to stop it, and then we'll do the second recording, and then we'll finish notes.